So excited to be here with Dina Gatchman. We're going to talk about her beautiful book, Sorry for Your Loss. I love the cover. I think it
Thank
is
you. There's a little story with that too.
the ultimate, yeah, ultimate casserole.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, of course.
So I'll just share a little bit of Dina's bio. Dina is a Pulitzer Center grantee and a frequent contributor to the New York Times, Vox, Texas Monthly, Vanity Fair, and more. She is the New York Times bestselling ghostwriter and the author of Brokenomics, 50 Ways to Live the Dream on a Dime. She lives in Austin, Texas with her son. They're both in the book.
Oh,
and I think it should also say that you're very funny and very
thank
wise.
you.
I loved all the humor throughout. Um, Tell me a little bit about how it is that you came to write the book, what that process was like. I know it had lots to do with your mother loss and sister
Mhm.
loss, but how did you jump from your loss, experience of loss, and the idea of writing the book?
Well, first, thanks for having me, and hi everybody out there. So I have been a writer for many years, a journalist, and wrote my first book in 2015. And it had been a long time since I had another idea for a book. It's not that easy to just pop out the great ideas for books, and never thought I'd write about grief. I'm not an expert, but when my mom died in 2018 from colon cancer, it took me about a year to be able to write about my grief. And I wrote an essay for the New York Times. It was actually my first byline there, so it was a very strange feeling of like dancing around the house because I'm in the New York Times, and then also realizing like I really wish I didn't have to write this.
Tell
So
me,
that was kind of
tell
okay.
her name,
My mom, Cindy.
Cindy. Yeah.
Cindy, yeah. And the essay was about our. We used to watch Hollywood red carpets because my mom loved Hollywood red carpets, and so it was about that first year after she died, like my struggle with like, do I watch it? Is it going to make me too sad? Is it? I didn't know what to do, and then I ended up watching, and it has become kind of my like a continuing bond or like a ritual that I do every single year. So the essay started it, and I noticed a lot of all these comments of people sharing their stories and wanting to talk about it. And I had come from the school of thought of like no one wants to talk about grief, everyone's so quiet about it, and all of a sudden there's this flood of people that had lost spouses 10 years ago, or recent losses. And so I thought, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know people wanted to talk about it so much. And then my sister Jackie died a little over 2 years later, more suddenly from she had suffered from alcohol issues for years and years. And so once that happened, people started giving me a couple people gave me grief books, and I loved a lot of them. And then some of them I didn't want another Zen quote. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to just ask questions as a journalist. I just wanted to ask questions, and I wanted to be mad. And so that's when I kind of thought, you know what, maybe I have a grief book. Like I can add to that shelf. That's what I thought, is like maybe because I have these two losses and they're so different, and I wanted humor and I wanted to explore it as a journalist and somebody that like doesn't I don't know that much about grief. So I wanted to learn. And so that's what prompted the book.
So it is for those of you that are listening. It's I always recommend memoir because I think you tell me your story and I see mine has sort of in it, and I've been writing to make sense of all kinds of things, including my personal losses, which is really what my Substack is about. It's permission granted. I feel
Mm.
like lots of people would say to me when I shared my story, I feel like you gave me permission to tell mine.
Yeah.
Like it gave them hope, or it validated that they weren't going to create like a big sad exodus, that we do need to tell our stories. And I
Mm.
firmly believe that we need to be seen, heard, witnessed, and understood in our grief in order for us to know that our grief mattered and our people matter. One of the things that I do love about it is like every so often you'll give us a journalistic tidbit about somebody that you interviewed.
Mm.
How did you decide on that for the format? Sounds like your journalist chops.
Yeah, I knew I didn't want to do a straight ahead memoir, right, of my mom and my sister. I wanted that exploratory kind of like asking questions because I had so many questions, right? I had questions with my mom. She went on hospice for the last 8 days of her life. So I had questions about end of life care and palliative care and death doulas, all things that we did not access, which we should have. I had questions about my sister because through the process of researching the book, I learned about ambiguous loss, which I had no clue what that was. And so for people who don't, I'm sure most people know, but it's, when the grief is triggered not by a death, but by an estrangement, or in the case of my sister, substance issues or dementia or whatever it may be. So um, I really wanted to, add the journalistic aspect so that maybe it could be helpful for other people too, but that I could understand on a deeper level, like what was going on. And it was so helpful because they had such different perspectives that I didn't know about before. And so it was very helpful.
I appreciate it. It was almost like little commercial breaks. Like we're gonna stop this story right here for like a little bit so that you can fully understand. And it was
Yeah.
like from like exactly what you said, from ritual to neuroscience, just like
Mhm.
little understanding of why we may feel the way that we do, or
Yeah.
like you said, ambiguous loss. I lost my dad in January, which was so different
Okay.
than, thank you, than the loss of my mom, Ellen. I lost my mom, Ellen, in 1993, and it was sudden, and
Mm.
I was so young. I was in my 20s. And back then, I always say no one said grief or grieving.
Oh yeah.
And so the messages I got from the world at large was basically like, you're a grown up, go carry.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize until I became, was about to become a motherless daughter, a motherless mother, if you will, that I started to explore like why my grief was suddenly bubbling up
Yeah.
and making me miss my mom ever so much more. My dad, I did experience that same ambiguous loss and anticipatory loss.
Mhm.
Lived alongside his memory loss for 10 years as his caregiver. So it was a completely and utterly different, and he was also 86 when he died,
Yeah.
but I wasn't able to really, as his caretaker of those years, let in the before dad. So I always say I'm grieving two guys. I feel like I'm grieving the guy that I met and loved along the way and accepted. And I really noticed a lot of what you said in meeting your sister, exactly
Mhm.
what it was along her journey. I related to so much of that, and they
Yeah.
were different,
Yeah.
but I think the permission and acceptance you gave her. There was one phrase that you learned along the way that I'm going to forget, but you're going to remember, that someone said to you about how you could accept and love her.
Oh, it's been a while. Yeah, it's probably detached with love.
Detach,
Detached, yes.
detach with love. Yeah, that was so extraordinary. Um, say more about that.
That was extremely helpful to me. So for years, like I said, my sister struggled for years and we didn't understand it. I think there's more understanding around alcohol and substance issues now. But when she first started, I mean, she was like a teenager, but I had no clue. I'm going off to college. And I'm like, I guess she'll just get it together eventually, right? I didn't understand the depth of it. And so eventually, after several years, I moved to New York. And that was the first time I'd been in the same city with my sister for a very long time. And so I moved to New York, and it was super hard because I hadn't experienced her as a person who's really suffering. And so she would flake on lunches and wouldn't show up and wouldn't call. And I was full of anxiety. I was full of all these. I didn't understand my emotions. So if I would have heard ambiguous loss back then, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's what's going on with me. But I just was a wreck. I was a total wreck,
The
like obsessively.
anxiety, yeah, even the anxiety that you were feeling in your body.
Yeah.
I think we recognize that we can have anxious grief.
Yes.
We don't even know what it is that we're experiencing. Yeah, you made some lunches that you started to put new systems in place, like make the
Mhm.
lunch work so that you
Yeah.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, she flaked. I would be right by work anyways. But I eventually went to an Al Anon meeting, which is, help for people who love people with issues like this. And that's what they said. They said you have to detach with love. And it was this literally like a like, oh, okay, I can do that because there's also so much guilt, right? When there's somebody where you're like, you feel so much guilt saying, like, I don't want to talk to you right now. Like I'm hanging up because you're not, this is getting belligerent or whatever. There's so much guilt, so that little phrase, or it's a big phrase, really helped me step away from that guilt and realize that, like, saying to her, I love you, I'm here for you, please call me when you're sober and I will talk to you. is an okay thing to do for me and for my own mental health. So detached with love was huge for me. Really, for years, I kind of clung to that.
Yeah, I was reading it and I was like, wow, I wonder how many tattoos of that there are
Probably a lot.
out in the world. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And and then you had a relationship with both parents that you were exploring, like, how did you live alongside this loss you shared with your parents? How do you meet it as her parents, which was so
Yeah.
different than how you met it as a sibling, and you were also sort of caring for them and their feelings and their emotions.
Yeah. I mean, my mom died first, and my sisters and I have two other sisters who are here. We always said, like, I don't know if mom would have survived this. Sadly, I just don't know how she would have handled that. But we definitely walked through with our dad, and the guy lost like the love of his life. I mean, my parents were together since they were teenagers, and then a daughter. And so we're all very close, and we text constantly. And so we definitely navigated it with him. But he thankfully got right into grief therapy and grief group. And like, he didn't like retreat, thank goodness, because that would have been another grief for us to deal with. So he's been amazing, honestly. I mean, it hasn't been easy, but he's been amazing that he's super open, and we talk about it all the time, and we talk about like dreams where they visit us and all that good stuff. So
Talk more about that. I love that. I was going to ask you in your world. I ask this to everybody. Where do your people live now for you?
definitely well, I talk to them all the time. With my mom, the red carpet ritual every year, some years I break out into an ugly cry, and some years I'm like, oh, I got through that fine. But I love doing it because I really can like conjure her voice in my head, because my mom was very funny, and she was like a sweet Joan Rivers kind of, like, if you can imagine. So the things she would say about the clothes, or the why isn't she wearing lipstick, or whatever it was, like, I love doing it because I can eh, kind of imagine what she's saying, and it's almost like I'm in conversation with
I
her.
hear you need to like write the whole thing, like
Yeah.
script, channel
Yeah.
mom.
I know. Sadly, I'm not as funny as her when it comes to the red carpet. I wish I saved like so many red carpet texts of hers, and they pop up as a yearly reminder, and I love them. So for my mom, it's talking to her a lot. And for Jackie, it's interesting because she was a very creative, like, artistic soul. And she and I kind of shared that bond. Even when she was very little, she was writing poems, but we never collaborate. I mean, we just, our relationship was very strained, honestly, for most of the time. And so when she died, and when I was writing So Sorry for Your Loss, I had this odd feeling that like she was writing it with me. And it was a very strong feeling of like, oh, we can finally collaborate in a way. And I know it's a book about her death, but I felt her presence. Like, I have her picture on the desk next to me, and um, I'm working on a new book project, fingers crossed, that I really feel like, again, I'm like, oh, that feeling's there again, that she's kind of like, we can finally, it's kind of like with ambiguous loss, like the relationship you wish you could have had with the person. Like, I always wished we could have that thing where we could like be creative together. And now I'm kind of making that happen with through writing with her. So, and then dreams, of course, they don't come enough, but when they do, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you talk about one heart wrenching moment where you see her signature red hair through the crowd in the
Yeah.
city to make the choice of whether or not you'll
Mhm.
protect your peace or engage. That will be with me forever.
Yeah, that was a yeah, that because Jackie would dye her hair red. And still to this day, if I see somebody with a shock of bright hair, my heart just stops. 'Cause it's just every single time. It's just a moment of like, oh my God. Because that was her thing, is like her signature red shades of hair. But yeah, there was that moment in the book. I didn't I guess I knew I wanted to write about it, even though I hadn't really told many people about it, because it's something you can be, again, it goes back to the guilt. Like, I was going to work, and she was walking down Fifth Avenue, and unmistakably it was her. And I chose not to say anything because I knew how bad off she was in that moment. I was heading into work, and I just didn't want a fight. I didn't want something negative, before I have to go wait tables for, how many ever hours. So yeah, that was a tough moment, just watching her walk by in the crowd, and, kind of living with that. But it goes back to, you have to protect yourself too, right? You have to watch out for your own mental health.
I think there are lots of lessons in there too. They, like you said, they may have a little bit of guilt under the hood, but I think the the way that you shared how you managed through those times, and also a beautiful, beautiful year where you
Mm.
really had this incredible connection, and I loved knowing your relationship with her and your whole family. I feel like I know them all now. Um, Tell me a little bit about what hospice was like. I feel like folks um, don't call soon enough. Sometimes they don't
Mm.
realize hospice is until somebody recommends it when there are no answers left. Did you have experience? What was your experience like with hospice?
It was a doozy. If you read the book, you'll see. Um, so with my mom, she had been sick for about 4.5 years. I mean, when you stage 4 colon cancer, we didn't know it at the time of her diagnosis. We thought, oh, in a year this will all be over. And she did chemo for 4 years. She did every experimental procedure, but we still always had hope, like, okay, maybe the next thing, or um, but towards that end of the 4 years, I mean, she was just so, I mean, it just kind of ravages your body and your mind. And so it was unexpected, and like we knew it was probably going to come 6 months, a year, but it was unexpected in the sense of like her colon tore, and that's when the doctors were like, she's going on hospice. Do you want to stay at the hospital, go home? So we brought her home. So my experience was horrible. Not because the hospice nurses or any of them were horrible. It was just we had no idea what to expect
Most
at all. Most
no,
people don't. I
no,
thought it'd be like a movie where there's like a nurse there 24/7 and they're like lighting candles and it's all peaceful, and
no. They're
it
like,
was not.
here's the medicine. And
Yes, they're like, good luck, see you tomorrow. And I mean, my sisters and I, because my dad wasn't capable. I mean, he was so distraught. So my sisters and I like formed this little team of, my youngest sister was super organized and she made all the appointments and she made sure everything was running like clockwork. And then my other sister and I were giving the medication. And so it was a total shock to our system. We had no idea that that was coming. And so, I think on our part, what we could have done is like talk to palliative care earlier, but we were so in denial and we were so, I think, just like, I can't even go there while our mom was, doing okay. But looking back, like it would have probably helped us a little bit because, during the orientation when the nurse was like, yeah, they'll pop in a couple times a day, we were like, "What, excuse me?" That doesn't sound right. So, that it was very rough. It was the roughest 8 days of my entire life. And I found, when I was writing the book, when I knew I wanted that chapter because people don't talk about it that much. And
so
again,
grateful. I was so grateful because I think we do maybe have that movie version
yeah, yeah,
what happens, and we don't know, or we think that if we're in charge of their medication or we're calling hospice that we're killing them. I hear that all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Did I, was it too much medicine? Was it too
Mhm.
soon? You hear all of these experiences, but also you don't know that it's not a 24/7 service.
Yep. I mean, I guess it can be if you're like a Kardashian or something, but you have to have the right, medical insurance in
No,
place. But most people, it's not gonna.
Medicare, yeah, the Medicare Medicaid version is they will
Yes, it's a little
cover.
different. Yeah, and yeah, so like we had to find humor in it a little, or at least writing about it. I definitely had to find humor in it, and there was some there, believe it or not. But it was very tough, but it just showed like we just came together. And but my sisters and I did have those moments where we're like, what are we killing? Like how do we, it's so scary. It's such a terrible responsibility. And there's one, the story in there where we actually lost the morphine for a bit. It felt like 5 hours. It was probably like 10 minutes, but we couldn't find it. And it was just horrible. I'm digging through the trash and our family friends come over and they're probably like, this is so sad and pitiful. And we found it right on the table. But yeah, it's so rough. And, people talk about it, but I wanted to be super honest about it, even though it's rough. I just wanted to, because I had never seen a really, really honest view of like what it could be like. And so I kind of decided to go there. But I think, I have heard from a lot of people that it is helpful, whether they've been through it or not, just to see like, okay, this is may
One,
happen.
and it was one family's experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
I made my whole family study like hospice nurse Julie's YouTube videos so that everybody was on board. Because it's my life's work, I knew a little more, but I didn't really know it for my own family. But I was so distraught about how my dad was treated during our hospital visits that I felt like they were really ill equipped to even communicate with somebody who not only was an elder, didn't have his, memory, and we had to advocate for him and be his
Yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
So we did call in palliative, and I will never forget saying it's the most humane thing you can do. And it was like a phrase that stuck with me because I feel like we talk about humane to our dogs, to our animals, to our, putting them down. I've heard that word used several times. Um, but I had never heard it used by a doctor. Like it's the humane thing to do. And it struck, I was with my brother when this palliative doctor said it. And one of the carers in the hospital was like, well, but who's going to sign the paperwork that he's dying? And I was like, oh, we're all dying. This doctor said, oh, we're all dying. It was just so matter of fact and plain,
Yeah.
and a different, it almost felt like we were speaking two languages in the hospital. There were all these like life-saving measures. But I said, okay, so take him into an MRI or a CAT scan, and we find out that this guy with, dementia for 10 years, like we're not having brain surgery. So
Yeah.
can we just get him comfortable, and can we just take him home, and can we never come back here again?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so because we were so early to my dad's hospice, like the guy got extra caretakers and he got a massage every week, and
Oh,
yeah, it was like a really beautiful experience. And then one day they just called us and said, we think you should come. And it was
yeah.
a day, we happened to not be visiting yet. Uh, he was in a memory care home, and yeah, it is. I hear all different, and also that it's your right, which I learned
Mhm.
from Julie, that if someone shows up and you don't have a good fit, that you can also ask for a different hospice service or nurse.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us feels very empowered in the situation. We're first timers usually, and we don't really know what the hell to expect. And you're in charge
Yeah.
for the kids. You're trying to just be, you know, Dina's who's losing her mom. You're just trying to. It's sort of like being a kid.
Yeah. I think that translates too to how like visitors during that time because that can be really hard too. Because for us, like, I mean, I don't even, I mean, it was like I read in the book, like time was like a melting Salvador Dali clock. I didn't know if I showered. I was like, did I brush my teeth? Like, it's just time is gone and you're just existing in this weird space. And so having visitors is very, very tough. And I think you can also advocate for yourself and say, you know what, I'm not feeling up to it today or whatever it is, or just no, right? And I think people don't feel nervous about that, but sometimes it's if you need that space, it's really important to not feel guilty about like actually today we just want to be really quiet and then, decide when you are okay with it.
Yeah, that's great advice. When you were reckoning with um, these losses, you also were bravely sharing that it kind of came out sideways in anger. And that's not an emotion that we really talk about a lot. I think it's like we feel like, especially for women, that it's like not polite or it's not okay. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So when my mom died, I went, back to work. I was working in an office at the time. I had like a horrible commute. Our son was 13, 14 months old. I mean, it was but I had this thing where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna soldier on, I'm gonna get to work, I'm gonna take care of the baby. Like, and about a year later, and I didn't go to therapy. I mean, I'd been to therapy at other times in my life, but like I didn't go to grief counseling. I was like, okay, I got this. It's people's mothers die. And about a year later, I realized I'm not okay. Like I was snapping at my husband, snapping at my son, who was like 2 years old at the time, just very agitated. I would say agitated was like an operative
But
word here.
the doc, like you get into like what was going on in your brain, and sometimes I think we think those things, but I love that like came right out. You're like, this
Yeah.
is muttering.
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
It was, yeah, it was just a lot of like, I just was so agitated about everything. And when I finally did go into, and that's when I knew I was like, I think I need help. Like I think I need to go to counseling. And I loved the first counselor didn't work out because she kept wanting me to go to my safe
You're
place, which
the chapter that is like safe place, go to hell or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah, telling my safe place to go to hell because it could work for some people, and I know it can be very helpful with anxiety. But like, I kept trying to imagine this like beautiful safe place, and I just kept getting like pissed off. I was like, I just want to be mad. Like my mom died. Like I don't want to be by a babbling brook. Like I want to like scream.
You,
So
you
I
needed a
found
you needed a rage room. You needed to rage.
exactly. I That would have been so helpful. Note to self. So I found another person, and he, just was didn't make me go to a safe place. But he said to me, one of the things in grief is that you have zero tolerance for other people's, I think he called it petty bullshit, right? And I was like, yes, yeah, just if somebody's like, oh, my day at work, you're just like, ugh, you're just so mad. How can you even complain? So, which isn't fair because, people are allowed to complain about
But it
things in life.
But doesn't it kind of like it shakes out your address book because there's like the folks that get it and the folks that don't get it, but it also your priorities and your idea of once someone dies, it sort of shakes things into a new perspective. So I totally get that. I used to have a boss that said no one died, no one had cancer, and I'm like, well, yeah, they have, yeah.
Yeah, what a phrase.
Yeah. So tell me also about the cool I love your cover, by the way, and I think it is one of the only things that we learn how to say is so sorry for your loss, and it's super well meaning, but I know you have a lot of feelings about that, and you said you even have a story on the cover.
Yeah, so I knew the minute it came into my head that I think I want to try to write a book about grief. The title it was just there, and that's not always true with books. Sometimes the title comes much later, and it's not easy to, even if you have a solid proposal, you're like, I don't even know what to call this thing. But with this one, I knew exactly immediately that that was the title, and it's because I had a pretty strong relationship to that phrase. So sorry for your loss, because when my mom died, then my sister, everybody writes it on the Facebook thread, and everybody texts it. So sorry for your loss, condolences. And again, and going back to the anger, it would just make me angry. Like that doesn't reflect how I'm feeling. So sorry for your loss felt like they weren't even putting much thought into it. And so it would make me angry. And then part of my sort of learning on this whole experience of learning about grief was that I came to realize, okay, people don't know how to talk about grief. They don't know what to say. So these are the things they go to. So it's well meaning. And so I became less angry about it. I mean, it's not my favorite thing, but like, it's just such everyone knows what that means, right? So sorry for your loss. But, I came to understand like, okay, the worst thing you can say is nothing. I did have that experience with somebody who said nothing, and we're no longer
I was just
in each other's
saying,
life.
are they
We're done. No, we're done.
book?
So, but so that's the worst thing, is just to say nothing, rather than like, I appreciated when people would say like, this is so tragic. Oh, my heart's broken. I'm like, that feels better to me. I mean, everyone's different. Maybe some people love So Sorry for Your Loss, but so that was why I wanted the title to be that. And then the cover, the publisher had the casserole and everything. It was such a great obvious symbol. But the first round, there was no nail polish on the fingernails. And I was like, yeah, I was like, I'm a Texas girl. Like, you have to like, and my mom would be like beside herself. So we added a little nail polish there, which was my little touch.
Yeah, it's best. And how did you feel about the way folks showed up? What are some of like the greatest hits and the not so
Yeah,
great? Like I always say, the cook cooks and you do not want me to cook for you.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I think we need to show up as our most authentic self. So
Mhm.
I love when people say like you could really sit with me in it. I could
Yeah,
also say this sucks and this is
yeah,
really uh,
yeah,
awful. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat this or,
yeah,
come with my crystals. I'm just going
yeah,
to this is this is awful and
yeah.
I'm sorry for the awful part. I'm not sorry for your loss because I know that we will all deal with loss
Mhm.
time in our life
Yeah.
and need to all reckon with it, but we need to figure out a way that we show up. I always say not showing up is not up. It's not optional. You
No,
need
no. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, the very worst is just nothing. I mean, that's just it's so hurtful. I mean, it's just the most hurtful thing in the world. But to me, the best things were the people that were like, This sucks," or "This is so tragic," or I have a friend that I love who just she didn't. It's hard to when people are like, "What can I do? What can I bring?" Like I got a package in the mail and it was this beautiful blanket and it just said, "I hope this brings you comfort." And I still cherish that blanket. If my dog gets anywhere near it, I'm like, "No, not that one." And so that was such a sweet gesture because you don't have to do it. You don't have to thank. You don't have to do anything. And so I love that. And then we had a family friend who during hospice like showed up unannounced, which normally wouldn't be the best thing, but this was perfect because we didn't have to get dressed. She just showed up, and this is a woman that like I always thought growing because I knew her growing up. Her daughter's one of my best friends. Like I thought of her as like crystal champagne flutes and like caviar, but she showed up at our door with a bucket of KFC, and she just said like, "You
It's
don't have to say anything, don't have to do anything. I'm just bringing this," and she like ran off. And my sister and I were like, "That was the nicest thing anyone's ever done," because KFC tastes really good. Turns out when you're grieving, at
I
least I.
I my sister and I had never spoken about this until many, many years later when she said, someone asked me what I can do, so and so
Mm,
called and they want to know what I should send or what I should do. And she said, I don't know if you remember this. And she relays a story that is like, I will never forget. My favorite thing that someone did for us was they created this basket and had pasta sauce and a thing of parmesan and a sauce and a pasta. And when everyone was gone,
yeah,
we made it ourselves and we
yeah.
sat the three of us and had a dinner. And it sort of showed us that we could.
Mhm. Oh, I love that, yeah.
There was it was like the basket of hope. Like,
Yeah.
didn't another casserole and we didn't want something from the freezer. And we were, those little, tea sandwiches and the things and not a there was something so beautiful just about it. And I don't even know if it would ring true for everybody else, but she sent it to this family because it was like we boiled the water and we made the pasta and we used
Yeah,
this expensive sauce and we grated our cheese and we sat down. We just felt like it'll be okay. Like we still could.
yeah,
We were gonna be three and we were never gonna forget her.
yeah,
Always be that fourth seat at the table. There was something
yeah.
really and symbolic. But my sister and I had never shared that that was meaningful to each of us, and how weird those baskets. Sometimes people send a basket, and that they don't.
Mm,
What arrives is not what they ordered. Like it's
yeah,
like weird piece of cheese and one strange chocolate, one piece of fruit, and like
yeah,
some old, you know, dried fruit bar. Like it's the
yeah.
strangest,
Popcorn.
yeah, strangest combination of
Yeah,
things. And you just know that that is not
yeah.
what they intended.
That's
Um,
so sweet. I never heard of that before. I love that idea of like it shows you that you can kind of, you know, do this yourself and like you're gonna be okay.
it's what it meant for us, but
Yeah,
there would be dinner again. That there would be some kind of we would be okay. I don't
yeah.
know. The basket of hope. I
The
think.
basket of hope. I love that.
Yeah. Um, Tell me, who were some of the people that you spoke to that you interviewed for the book? I know Evermore was one of
Mhm.
the organizers.
Joelle. Yeah.
I love Joelle. Tell me some of what she shared with you that surprised you. I know that it was, after your losses. So
Yeah.
tell me about the folks that you spoke to.
So I found her because Evermore is this amazing organization that really fights hard for bereavement care in America and just understanding around grief. And she works very hard. I actually found her on a short documentary about grief, and I was just loved what she said and reached out to her. So she was nice enough to be interviewed, and she talked. There's a chapter on losing a child, and I was very nervous to have that chapter in the book because it's not my personal experience, and I just thought, I don't want to like feel like I'm just throwing in everything in the kitchen sink. But my editor was like, you really should do it. And I'm so glad because talking to people like her really helped me understand what a grieving parent may need or want. I mean, everyone's different again, but she really talked about, like, she had lost a daughter when she was about, I think, 5 months old. And so it really helped me hearing her say, like, I want to talk about her. Like, I want people to know her name. And it helped me kind of make take that big step of like talking to a parent who's lost a child is very scary. And so being able to realize, like, oh, actually, it's worse to sort of clam up or
Mhm.
awkwardly change the subject. And so I just thought she was amazing. And she said, was it no, it wasn't Joel, it was somebody else that said that, but that was a palliative care person. But yeah, just hearing her kind of openness was very helpful to me. And this just popped in my head, but when I did talk to a palliative care doctor, I loved one thing she said, because we really struggled when my mom was still here with like addressing end of life issues, because we didn't want to upset her. Like I said before, we were in such denial. And so we didn't know how to even have those conversations. And so what the palliative care doctor told me is what she says to patients is that we're going to have this imaginary box, and I'm going to open the box and we can look in, but then we can close the box. And I was like, oh, that would have been so helpful for us to be like, it's something you can open and then you can shut, but it's very
Right.
scary to open it.
So amazing. Um, is your family aware of your end of life wishes?
You know what's funny? After when I talk to people like that doctor, I sat my poor husband down, and I'm like, okay, we need to talk about when we die. And he's like, what? He's like watching basketball or something. And no, we need to do this now. So we did have a conversation. And then my dad did change his health insurance, actually, so that maybe he'll have a little more care than we had. So we started to have those conversations, and I realized, like, it's actually better to have it when you're, you know, younger, and it's not right there imminent. It's very hard when it's like someone is diagnosed or someone's sick, and because then it's all these emotions are there. But if you have it really early on, when you can just open the box and close it, it's much easier.
I also think it creates something that I call clean grief. Like, isn't it enough that we already are grievers and losing a loved one? But when you have to guess if you're making the right decisions on their
Yeah.
behalf, to reckon with the decisions that you made when they're dead and decide, look back, if one more doctor, if one more thing, if we
Yeah.
had only. There's also a moment where you decide um, whether or not to bury your sister with a, a, a ring. And
Yeah.
another poignant moment for me where you were like asking like a religious leader their
Mhm.
ideas because you had heard one thing, and I loved what he shared with all of you. Will you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. So that was another part that I actually was not going to put in the book. It was about going to see my sister at the funeral home, because she had died. It was suddenly, and she was alone, and she was in Colorado. We had to bring her to Houston. It was not fun. So we were going to see her. It was my dad and my two sisters, and I think my brother-in-law was with us. And it was just, as you can imagine, it's not, nothing anyone ever wants to do. So we were already full of nerves and anxiety and just horrible. But my sister's husband asked if she could be buried with his wedding ring. And my dad, so we're Jewish. And so, if you're very traditional, you're not supposed to be buried with any jewelry, nothing. And with our mom, we were like, okay, our mom always looked put together, like, we're going to put some earrings on her, like, whatever. So we had to convince my dad. And I remember, I think one of my sisters told the funeral director, like, please do her makeup right. She would be so mad to be, like, buried
Yeah,
with bad makeup.
Dina, we
Um,
brought my mother's makeup bag.
yeah,
We were like,
we do too. We do too.
we
Yeah,
were
we were like, here's her makeup. So
yeah,
use that, please.
just right.
Yeah,
We're like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so with my sister, my dad, and he was very worried about the tradition. He's like, well, you're not supposed to be buried with anything. And he was stressing out about it. And so I asked the funeral director, who we got to know, because he, through our moms. And now we're like, we called him Uncle. I changed his
Uncle
name in the book, but Uncle Sid.
Uncle Sid.
Uh, yeah, he was hilarious. Very sweet. And so I asked him to try and get my dad to calm down. I was like, Uncle Sid, like, I'm sure you bury Jewish people with plenty of things. And he goes, oh, you wouldn't believe it. He's like, baseballs and liquor bottles and da da da. And so I was like, okay, dad, see. So she got the ring. So it worked out fine.
It was so great. And also so poignant that you had like a moment like you supported your dad
Yeah.
in walking him in, and I my heart burst in that moment of all of you seeing her, um, which is really hard. It's
Yeah.
really we had a choice too whether we wanted to see my mom,
Mm.
and it just didn't look like her at all. It was
Yeah.
so really awful.
It was hard. And it's one of those things where yeah, like I said, I wasn't gonna put it in the book at all. I was like, absolutely not. Like, why would I write about this? It's too much. I kept thinking like it's too much. But then I realized as I'm talking to all these experts and talking to parents who've lost children, like that's the point. Like if we don't say the things that are really hard or the moments that are really raw and true, then we're avoiding it. And it makes it harder for people who are like, well, that's not really what it looked like for me. So I realized, you know what, I kind of do need to put this in there. And if it's too much for somebody, then maybe this isn't the book for them, or maybe they can skip past it. But it felt like that was one of the most raw moments of grief. So I should add it.
I was I we were right there with you, and I think sometimes we do. It almost felt like writing, from the red hot center, real close to your grief. And I think sometimes we feel so alone and lonely in those feelings. And so, this is the kind of book that I would always recommend. It had just a little bit of all of it, including pet loss.
Yeah. Yeah. That was another one that the pet loss was in there from the beginning, but then I got cold feet, like I was like, I don't know, pets, maybe I'm talking about seeing my sister at the funeral home, and then I'm going to talk about, pets. Is that too frivolous? And then, as fate would have it, we got a dog like right around that time. And I was like, immediately like, oh no, this is very valid, very real. I love that he was like literally sitting right there next to me. Um,
I walked out of his bed like,
he's like sleeping down there. He's so cute. So the minute we had him, I was like, oh, this is so valid. And then when I talk to people, it's, I've gotten a lot of feedback of like there people are appreciative to put pet grief on the same level because it's
right.
absolutely devastating. I mean, it's someone in your life. So I'm glad it I'm glad I got over myself and included that.
I will also say this is a book of essays, and
Mm.
so what I also like about it is I read it in order in a linear fashion. But I think what's so nice about it is just what you said. If there is a chapter that resonates with you and one that feels too heavy or too hard, you can read the individual essays. They can certainly stand alone, which I loved. Um, I'm so grateful for books like this. I love being
Thank
able
you.
to recommend them. You had also told me that in some of the research that you did for the article for the Times, that you came across some gorgeous rituals and ways of remembering loved ones. Will you share some of those with me?
Yeah, one thing I learned about it's a Japanese ritual. I had interviewed a monk. I think she lives in Northern California, and it's I'm going to forget the name now, but it's a ritual for actually traditionally for child loss. And everyone goes, they come together and you write the name of the child on a piece of paper, and then the person who's leading the ceremony will read the names of the children. I talked to one woman who had four miscarriages, and she said this ritual like really helped her feel validated because if she had said the names of these children to her friends, she was afraid they'd be like, well, that's a little nuts. But doing it in this ceremony, people were like totally understood and valued. And even just having their names said was so helpful to her. So I thought that was so beautiful. And then you can, have a statue like commemorating your person in a garden. And what she said was so beautiful is that I think she's in near Portland actually, that the moss grows over the statues, and so it kind of becomes one with the land. And it's a very beautiful thing that I thought it seems like it had helped a lot of people.
Mm. And are you a person? Is the Are you a cemetery person?
I do that. My sister, and it's so sad. My sister and my mom are right next to each other. And I hate even saying that's like so sad. But so they're in Houston, where my like grandfather and grandmother. So it's every year in November, because my mom died November 25th. Yeah, it was the day before my birthday. So every year in November when we're all together for Thanksgiving, we all go, and we like see them, and then my dad will go a couple more times a year, but I'm not in Houston. But but definitely every November. And if there's another time we can go, we go visit. But it's, it's nice to go visit. And my son, speaking of rituals, so he was about a year when my mom died and he never met my sister. And so for me, it's important to kind of keep them alive for him and help him get to know them. So we brought him and my niece, who's his exact same age, and once they were a little bit older, and we get to say like, here's Cece and here's Aunt Jackie, and tell stories, and they put little stones on the grave, and so I think it's really important for him to kind of work through that and understand it. And then I tell him stories constantly about them and little phrases that my mom would say, and now he says them, which is the cutest. And he's got a little Texas accent. So my mom used to always say, it takes all kinds, like everybody's different. And so I've taught this to my son, who now uses it to manipulate me. So like if he's doing something and I'm like, I really wish you wouldn't do that, he'll be like, it takes all kinds. And I'm like, oh, but at least he's using my mom's phrase. So it's okay. So it's a fun way for me to like keep them alive, is like teaching him what they said, or little stories, like,
Love that.
yeah.
My girls never knew my mom. She died before I had kids, and so I call just by calling her Grandma Ellen.
Yeah.
You know, I keep her memory alive. They feel like they know her, and that is the greatest gift that anyone can
Important.
say. And I think you did them both proud, because I felt very much like I knew both of them as I read the book as well. You also talked about the Grief Project, which sounded so interesting,
Mhm.
that you met.
That was yeah, that was for the New York Times. So that was last spring, I think. Yeah, that came out last spring. But because I've written so much about grief and loss now, and I keep telling myself like I'm not going to do it anymore. And then something comes along and then I do it again. But because it's something, as you know very well, like once it is in you, like you can either push it aside, or for me, I'd rather kind of look at it head on and keep exploring it and keep learning about it, and hearing other people's stories is so important. So the Grief Project, an editor came to me from the New York Times, and he wanted to talk to artists about who've experienced grief and loss, like how that informs their creativity, how it's kind of woven in through their process and their work. And so it was about a 6 month project, and there was an incredible photographer. And so I talked to 10 people, so authors, filmmakers, musicians, about how grief and loss inform their work. And it was very powerful. And the photos are more kind of abstract, but if anyone hasn't seen it, I think it's a pretty
I'll
powerful
I'll
text.
link Dina's article in the New York Times. Did you have a favorite book or resource that you read or used in your along your grief journey or your healing?
Um, I mean, I think, Joan Didion's kind of the queen of, to me, grief memoir. So her book
That's
was
my favorite.
very, I mean, it's just so beautiful. And, she's such a, like spare writer in a sense, I mean, she's just, she had one line, I think I put this in my book, that just stuck with me. It's, death. I think it's death leaves no pencil marks. I'm probably totally butchering that, but like, um, or leaves no faint lines, no pencil marks, something like that, where it's basically meaning you can't erase it, right? You can't, I mean, so that book really resonated. I thought it was very beautiful. And after I wrote the book, um, I mean, Mary Frances O'Connor's book, actually, I read, which I loved, which is more the scientific side, but it was very informative and
The gr-
interesting for me.
yeah, the grieving brain.
Grieving Brain. Yeah, the Grieving Brain.
She's just here released the grieving body. I think sometimes understanding why brain fog, understanding the neuroscience, what happens in the body, what happens in our brain to protect us, to help us remember, help us forget, all kinds of things. Like, and also that the body knows how to die.
Yeah, that's a wild thing to see.
It is. It really
Yeah.
is. I'm so grateful to talk to you about this. I'm so grateful
Thank you.
for the book in the world. I
Thank you.
I read and I read it again for this interview
Aw.
today, and it touched me in different and new ways, because I read it before my dad died, and then I read it after. And I think, like I said, there was lots in your sister's story that really resonated with me, and they couldn't have been more different. So
Yes.
I would just say sometimes somebody writes something, says something, um, and you have never thought of it yourself, or you alone in that thinking. It can be terribly isolating and lonely. And a lot of us just try to return to normal, just as you did. I did it
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah.
my side, I went right to owning a PR agency, and like it wasn't until, as I said, I really pushed up against something that just felt like I fell apart, and it
Mhm.
was then that I really sought help.
Yeah.
There are loads of resources on Substack and also on my website at thememoryscircle.com. And I urge you to get Dina's book, So Sorry for Your Loss.
Thank
It's a
you.
beauty. And we'll later do a note, post a note to that New York Times article. I would love to see that. I think there's so much creativity and ritual and ways, as you said, continuing bonds, ways that we can
Mhm.
move our loved ones forward. And I hope ours are together.
Yes, for sure.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Especially,
you.
especially to watch the carpet. I mean, come on.
I mean, of course.
Ellen,
That's the
Ellen,
best grief ritual ever.
Ellen she would be so, and maybe you and I can text.
Yeah, exactly. That I know. Well, it's so sweet because my friends, they're the best. Like this is when people show up. Like to this day, it's been since 2018, and I have a couple friends when it's Oscars or Golden Globes, red carpet. Like they'll send a text and be like, "What do you think of her dress?" And I'm like, "I know why they're doing that, and it's the most touching. Like I love them. I mean, it's just the most touching thing because it's years later and they still do it.
Oh, I
It's
love
really
that.
sweet.
See, there's always show up for one
Yeah,
another.
yeah.
So thank you, Dina. Thanks for,
Thank you so much for having me.
okay, talk soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.